Should we start? Good morning, everyone. And while we wait for Dr. Preeti Rao to join us, it is indeed a pleasure to be here moderating a panel which is on technology, and it is an all-women's panel. So extremely happy to be a part of this group. And I would like to quickly introduce the panelists to you. I have with me Nina Bual, who is the co-founder of Cyberlite. She works at the intersection of digital safety, education, and child-centered technology design. Her experience informs conversations in safe and thoughtful technology for young learners. I have Sonali with me. Sonali is the co-founder and managing director of Sesame workshop in India, where she leads the organization's educational mission to create innovative, engaging media and learning initiatives that help children grow smarter, stronger, and learner. Welcome, Sonali. I have Dr. Vanita Sharma, advisor, strategic initiatives at the Reliance Foundation, and she works on guiding and supporting initiatives across education and social development. And her perspective supports discussions on responsible and scalable approaches to digital use in early learning. And I see Dr. Preeti Rao in the room as well. Dr. Preeti Rao is the professor of electrical engineering at IIT Bombay. Her academic work spans technology, signal processing, and applied research. And she offers insights into how advanced technologies can be thoughtfully applied in learning contexts. Welcome, Preeti. So technology and young learners, right, is often a very controversial topic. And it comes, but the fact also is that all young learners today are exposed to technology. We at CSF had conducted a survey called the Bharat Survey for EdTech a couple of years back. And we found that in low-income households, which meant that households that were sending their children to either government schools or affordable private schools, device penetration, and that was smartphones, was almost ubiquitous. And more than 74% of children were spending more than 30 minutes a day on their parents' phones every day. And they were watching YouTube or playing games. So it's not as if young learners are not exposed to technology. I think the conversation today is how can we make technology most useful for these learners so that in addition to attaining the foundational literacy and numeracy skills that in support of the Nipun Bharat mission, we are also imbibing them with the necessary 21st century skills that will allow them to succeed in the world that is to come. And with that, I would like to start with you, Nina. And I know that you have been working extensively in the space of digital security and also AI literacy. And my question to you is that how should these technology solutions be designed so that they are playful, they ensure foundational literacy and numeracy, but at the same time, they're safe?
It's a great question because it's natural for us to turn to digital and believe that it will aid the education. So the first question I always ask is, do we need to bring technology into this learning experience? And should we? Just because we can, does it actually motivate the user to learn and to develop their cognitive skills? I'll give you an example of this. My son learns Mandarin, so he likes to use Duolingo. And I get very excited because for 1 week, he's logging on to Duolingo every day. And I think, I've cracked it. I no longer need the Mandarin teacher. This technology is helping him. Then I look over and say to him, why are you on Duolingo every day? And he says, I have to maintain my streak. Now, the technology has motivated him to stay on it because it's designed to keep his mind share. It's putting him into a trance while he's there, and he's playing chess. His level of Mandarin did not move whatsoever. Now, this is an app that we would readily bring into the classroom, but we now had to remember the app has its own motivation. How do I get more teachers to use it? How do I get the education sector to allow me to grow? So when we're looking at the technology we're bringing in, one, we have to keep re-looking at its development and its design and whether it creates experiences of cognitive development. So one of the things I would urge when you're looking at education and you're looking at apps, can you see cognitive growth and assessment? The easiest way to get your classroom to be quiet is to turn on YouTube. If everything is going chaotically wrong, there is a video that will support you. Now, does your user know why they're watching the video and what they're supposed to get from that experience? We can use these tools to support us. We're teachers, and at the end of the day, we sometimes need that decompression. But every time we bring in that tool or that learning experience, we need to explain to the child why the digital solution has come in and not just land it in there, because it is taking away the children's agency. And quiet classrooms do not mean they're learning. It means sometimes that they've gone into a trance and they're just viewing.
Absolutely. Alnina, I would want you to speak a little about safety as well. How do you think about safety in the context of these educational tools?
So we work at Cyberlite. We work in cyber safety and AI literacy and safety, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail. We do that in 16 countries, and we have a vast footprint in India. We're based in Bangalore. One of the things that we've understood is when we're coming to safety, and we're working with a school and Vanita here as well, is who's the key stakeholder when introducing these digital tools and how to utilize technology. Is it on the parent? Is it on the teacher? The teacher has so much to do, and then when we're saying, can you teach cyber safety as well, but also bring in all the digital solutions into the classroom to aid, it gets very confusing. So as educators, first of all, know your stance, your culture on why you're bringing in digital technology, and then know the conversations you need to have at that developmental level. So when we talk about consent, can we start from early years about consent in technology? It's been very normalized that we take a photo in the classroom, we share it on Toddle, and then our children's digital identity has gone across without their actual permission or their consent. So what are the things that we are seeing going wrong with ourselves? Like focus. How many of you have looked at Instagram? Of course we have, because we are trained monkeys. We will do what we're told. If a notification comes through while I'm talking, of course you need to see what Zepto wants or Swiggy wants, right? So we ourselves see how technology is affecting our focus. How can we open those conversations very young to children as well? As carefully as observing, as soon as the iPads come in the classroom, the attention spans of the 5-year-olds of, the iPads come. Now, why do you feel like that? What's exciting about it? Start having those conversations, and simple things about safety as well. If you're bringing in technology, did you go over to the privacy settings as a school? Did you have a look at where the data is going? Have you done your due diligence before you've readily given away information about your students? That will be weaponized against them at some stage. Whether it's through the algorithm or a bad actor looking for that information, we are the safeguarders of their digital identity. Are we using our power effectively?
Absolutely. I think both points are extremely important, right? Is the child actually, is the app actually helping the child to learn, or is it just an engagement tool? Yeah. And how do we keep them safe? And these are questions I think that caregivers, educators are all struggling with. I'll come to you, Preeti. And just for context, Preeti has been working on developing an AI-powered assessment tool for oral reading fluency, which is called Tara. And one of the most powerful use cases of AI in the context of education is around assessments. But Preeti, the question that often gets asked is whether assessment is only about monitoring, or is there a loop that ties back with remediation and helping children learn better? Otherwise, I heard it being said in the previous panel as well, the feedback never gets used by the teachers. So how do you think about Tara in the context of the entire cycle of teaching and learning?
Yeah, thank you so much, Gouri, and I'm truly grateful to the previous panelists and also to Nina now for talking about where assessment can play a role. So what we built, it's called TARA, which is an acronym for Teacher's Assistant, for reading assessment. So I think we did the right thing by making it a teacher's assistant and somehow empowering teachers to use it. And although it does generate a lot of data and reports, and I heard Mr. Ankit Goel talking about how data can actually be seen as a threat, and that's like a new, something new for me, realizing that coming purely from the technology side, where we are only trying to, tweak our technology to make it more and more accurate and so on. But one thing I realized also along the way is understanding how to do assessment well also teaches you really what the correct learning outcomes are. So you just spoke about, Duolingo and figuring out that, it's not really helping achieve those learning outcomes. So understanding assessment and the rubrics and so on, and then making it possible for someone, like a teacher to actually find out those, learning outcomes via these standardized rubrics, and also helping them interpret and use them, I think we should, see as really our chief role. So for example, for reading, NEP 2020 has brought in, globally well-founded research to say that reading accuracy should be measured in terms of, or reading skill should be measured in terms of the accuracy as well as the pace of reading and something called expression. So if we understand that, we come to know that reading is really linked to comprehension, and the goal of reading is really for a child to engage with text and understand the meaning from text, all of which gets captured in the speed, their accuracy of reading, and their expression. So understanding that well, for example, enables teachers to know it's not about just speed, because we've seen children using apps who just run out of breath when they're being assessed because they're just trying to read as fast as possible. But then, the learning outcomes in terms of expressiveness and how it's linked to comprehension are also built in. So good assessment can actually help an understanding of, what it really means to achieve that particular, proficiency, and give feedback on those specific attributes so that, appropriate, personalized instruction can be given, and, teachers are actually, made aware of, where they're heading. And then, of course, like, Urmila on the last panel spoke about formative assessments. So obviously, assessment is a part of that too, and I think that has a really important role in terms of guiding the whole learning trajectory and the learning path in terms of providing, hopefully, very appropriate feedback. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I think in the government school context in particular, right, the assessment happens, but it is never able to inform instruction because, there is never the feedback that comes to the teacher on where her class is, where particular students are. And I think tools like Tara will really enable that. So it is a powerful technology that is not only, and I'm talking about AI, that is not only creating efficiency in the system, but is also leading to effectiveness in many ways, right? And Sonali, coming to you, right? Sesame workshop known for happy play-based learning, right? And how do you translate some of that into digital screens, right? How do you ensure it still remains engaging, relevant for the community, for the parents, for the students?
I think this is the moot question. And just picking from something that came up in the panel yesterday about the focus being on relationships and social connectedness. I think that's really more and more what we are chasing in a world that, while digital divides us, isolates us, we are really looking at what those relationships mean. And I think that's where the focus is. And I want to say this, that many of us have spoken about learning and how schools are centers of learning. Once we asked a kid, and I think if you ask any kid, why do you go to school? They'll not say to study, but to play with friends. And that's what the school is, and all your memories of school days were the fights you had, the chocolates that were stolen, the tiffins that you ate from your friends. So that social connectedness is what needs to be translated. And I think at Sesame, we really focus on that. And we use the power of our Muppets, which are so relatable for children. And once they relate to these characters, and I think this is something that we are seeing across all children media, that when they connect with them and they see their behaviors, what they're trying to do, the real life problems that they're trying to solve, children start emulating them. This then doesn't stop here. for Sesame, it's very critical that parents or caregivers start relating with this. It is not just the children's journey. We do believe in co-viewership, that parents should be engaged, and I think yesterday in Rich Talk and other such discussions, this came up, that how children learn better, and as parents can also revalidate those interconnectednesses, the children then become much more adept at those behaviors and practices. So this connection is very, very important that we need to really look at and demonstrate. So as we speak about socio-emotional well-being, and that I think has become such a critical, topic, especially we've seen this, I mean, it's always been there and important, but I think as we came out of COVID and during COVID, this gained a lot of saliency that, children are struggling. We have used this term COVID babies, those who couldn't socialize, couldn't go to kindergarten. How are they dealing with these socio-emotional questions and their well-being? I think this is really important. And we saw, and we continue to see that on our YouTube channel, as Sesame made the shift from television to digital, as we saw 90% of our traffic on YouTube actually comes on the mobile phone. So validates, Gouri, what you just spoke about. And 70% of people are looking at the socio-emotional well-being content. So that is enormous. I mean, people would imagine that folks would go for the literacy, for the math content, but no, they're actually looking for life skills. And that is very, very significant. We have an app, the Chalo Sesame Street app, which is a part of the Lifted project. There, about 40% of folks are clicking on the world that is to do with socio-emotional well-being. So this is really, really big. And I think for Sesame, as we create content, I think I'll speak about that a little later, but it is about those difficult topics. And sometimes children, and we spoke about this yesterday, find it difficult to verbalize. And emotions are possibly the most difficult thing for children to verbalize, especially young children. And I still remember, I just came back from Bahraich, which is in Uttar Pradesh, and we work in an Anganwadi there, and we've been working on actually getting children to understand socio-emotional issues like expressing what does anger mean, how can you express anger, how can you control anger, and it was just so amazing when you spoke to them and you said, okay, what makes you happy when mom gives me the food I wanted? What makes you sad when mom gets angry? So that little child's world revolves around her parents. And when we asked her to sort of, how do you get upset? She folded her arms and said, So, it's not easy for children to verbalize it. So through these videos, through these, digital tools, you're giving that to children. It's not a replacement. It's an enabler. Again, I think we've always said this, and that's why I began with my little narrative about why children go to school, that digital is an enabler. It supports children, but cannot replace any of that connectedness which happens in real life.
Wonderful, thank you. And Vanita, I'll move on from that very interesting insight about parental engagement being critical for a child's learning to asking you, you've had the privilege of actually seeing programs across multiple parts of India, across age groups. And my question to you is that how do you see EdTech being adopted by young learners through the diversity that you have been have had the privilege to witness?
Thanks, Gouri. And I think as you started by saying, there are mixed feelings and still a lot of questions about, the role of EdTech and, how can we use it? Should we use it? How do we make sure that it's equitable? But I think certainly from what we've seen in the last few years, and starting actually in 2020, I think when we were first thinking about supporting different initiatives like Lifted, where we have the EdTech Accelerator, before COVID, one of the questions would have been, would EdTech really even be accessible for everybody? And I think one of the things that we did see during COVID itself was just how important a role technology then did play for keeping education going. We saw the challenges in making it accessible for everybody, but we also saw how quickly families, especially in low resource settings, were able to pivot and somehow make it work. With, as you say, now there's a much greater device penetration, there's much greater access to digital. So even, families from, more low-income backgrounds were able to enable their children to learn. Anecdotally, I mean, one of the things that, we've heard from some of our partners over the last few years is that whilst there was a lot of progress during COVID, actually since COVID, it's actually much harder because at that time, if a family has only one device, that device was at home. And, the father, the mother were at home, and there was that opportunity to be able to use it to facilitate learning. After COVID, the father and mother are maybe not in the house at the time when the learning is going to take place. So, I think those were some initial learnings that we saw through COVID, but through supporting the EdTech Lifted Accelerator, I think one of the things that we have seen is the important role that EdTech solutions like Sesame Workshop and like some of the other ones that we have been supporting can play in helping increase access to quality education resources, especially for families from low resource backgrounds, where the parents may also have limited literacy, may have had limited education themselves. It provides an opportunity to really help support home learning, but it's important to figure out how to get the balance right. A lot of different things that have sort of emerged. One is that, firstly, that consideration of access to a device. And one of the partners that was supported through the Lifted Accelerator, they were trialing a live classes session, which would enable parents to, support their children with access to some live classes after school. And in the beginning, they had a very sort of low pickup, and they thought it wasn't working. But when they actually studied and got some feedback, they found that the time they were doing the live classes didn't really work. So by switching the timing to when, the mother would be around, but, doing other things, and she could let go of the phone, but still be around to support the child, made a big difference. So those aspects around sort of timing, I think, are important. But I think going back to what we were saying about it's not a replacement. It's not a replacement for the teacher, and it's not a replacement for the parent. Getting that model right so that it becomes not something that you give the child and then say, okay, now you occupy yourself, but how can you use it as a tool that supports the parent to support the child, and it's focused on developing those critical learning skills. Also, how do you help parents be able to judge what are the right tools to use? What is a good quality tool? What is, as Nina was saying, that a tool that is helping develop the child's critical thinking? It's not just about engaging them. It is about helping them learn. And I think one of the other things that we've also found is that right now, when we're looking at measuring whether EdTech is making a difference, there's a lot of focus on how many young people are using it, how engaged are they on the device. But we need to do a lot more in actually measuring, is it actually helping improve educational outcomes? And so I think a lot of good things are emerging, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done to be able to see how we do this in a way that is equitable, that is safe, and also very, very critical is seeing how these tools can help support the learning in the school and where there are those opportunities for there to be that integration between school and home learning.
No, absolutely. I think what I'm taking away from this round of questions is essentially that EdTech it shouldn't be a babysitter for the child, right? We need to ensure that children are actually learning because they're spending time on it. And I just want to reference one interesting project that was led by IIT Bombay called EdTech Tulna, which was actually trying to figure whether the solutions that children are getting exposed to are actually pedagogically sound, contextually relevant, and have the necessary affordances of technology that will allow the child to learn. And honestly, when governments would procure EdTech, they would largely procure the hardware because they knew how to spec the hardware. You can spec a computer, you can spec, the other, the things that go with it, but you cannot spec the software. How will you say whether this personalized adaptive learning solution is actually more adaptive than the other solution? You needed the standards for that. And that's what the team at IIT Bombay did. They built the standards for what good quality EdTech looks like. And many governments are now using those standards as they procure, as they conduct large-scale procurements for educational technology. And that's what makes all the difference. Because then you're just moving away from just procuring hardware to procuring the software, which will make the difference to the child. And with that, Nina, I will come to the next question, which is a little bit around scaling, right? So as EdTech and AI, moves to large scale, inadvertently, right? How do you think about the scaling? What are the things that we need to keep in mind as we scale EdTech and AI?
So from a cyber safety angle, scale is incredibly important to us. At the moment, it's gated. Who gets the cyber safety, who gets to understand the risk, by the schools or the organizations who understand that this is something that needs to be looked at. But all of our children are at risk at cyber safety. 3 out of 4 children in India are on Roblox, and that is the gateway to groomers, to cyber scams, and to crime. So how do I ensure that I scale, that I can be in a room like this, and I can be talking to somebody in a rural India and ensuring that they have the same tools and the same cyber safety initiatives there? One, I need to go hand in hand with the corporates, with the technology companies, and make sure they're a key stakeholder to get to the ground level. 2, I have to localize. I can't be having the same conversation I'm having in a classroom in Singapore, in a mature setting with budget and time. And the one thing I hear over and over again, we care. We really can see what's happening to our children. I just don't have the time. So where can I get the time? Giving you one more curriculum on top of all the curriculums you're already teaching does not make you feel empowered. It makes you feel exhausted. So where can I do that as well? And so I need to ensure that I have the tools to train people locally to speak in the language and the issues they're facing. So we'll just talk about 2 schools here. One will be coming to me now and saying, we're having a real problem with cyberbullying. This is my core requirement right now, and I don't have anyone in the school who understands our policy, how to mitigate cyberbullying. Cyberbullying in India is at 85%. We are the highest in the world. So where's the mitigation plan? We're not too sure. And then I'll have another school that's coming to me and saying, I'm having a problem with children just posting everything online, and our school reputation is in the pan, right? What do we do about their digital identity? The only way you can deal with those 2 case studies is to have cyber leads within your environment or your schools. So training the teachers, training the organization is very important, and convincing schools and organizations that they're the key stakeholder. We know that we believe it's parents' responsibility. The parents are the ones at home allowing the child to have 8 hours on their device. The parents are the ones who are allowing the devices into the bedroom. The parents are not checking. But let's be key. In most families and settings, the key technology person is the child. The experience and the knowledge and the mother is, here's the phone, you tell me what to do with it, I don't know. So asking the parents to come on that journey without us indicating or prodding them to be part of it is just not coming to happen. So to build scale, we need first, as education companies and educators, to say, we have skin in this game, we need to see change, and then indicate how we start that change. We do this by working with companies like Microsoft, we work with Palo Alto. If anybody who needs anything, please, we have these technology companies supporting us. But then at policy level, we need to start indicating we want more. So we work with a gaming company, I won't say who they are, but they asked us to do some work in Indonesia. And I said to them, this is great, can we do this in India? Oh, no one's asked us to. We don't have the same safety settings in India as they do in America. Our children's safety settings are different because nobody's asked for them to be there here. So we need to, at every level, ensure there's an adult in the room because our children are in that room. Our children are at risk, and we're just not sitting beside them.
I mean, so true, so true. And yeah.
Sorry, a little rant there, but it does get to me.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. I think some of these conversations are not happening, with the intensity that they need to happen at all.
They're
right?
just not happening at all. If you think about your own programs, if you know how many times you hear of a cyber scam or bullying, then tell me how many hours a day that a year that you do in your schools.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And with that, Preeti, I'll come to you with a little bit more of, a technical question, right? So as you're thinking about scaling Tara to multiple languages, to different parts of the country, and also the fact that you now have a partnership with the Ministry of Education, was Tara built keeping in mind very quiet classrooms? How do you account for all the chaos that happens, the noise in the classroom? And also, how do you account for the linguistic diversity of India? And how will the product evolve in order to cater to both of these?
Yeah, thanks. You've actually put your finger on those very challenges, which are obviously very relevant to anybody building this kind of technology. So I'll start with the linguistic part. I mean, of course, we want all our technology and AI-based solutions to be bias-free, which means, it has to work equally well. I cannot say, let's say, a child in the Northeast is not speaking let's say, Hindi well enough because maybe they come with something that's a very acceptable accent in that part of the country. So a lot of these kind of problems are usually solved by data, by having data that really is representative of the population, and having benchmarks also that actually apply and are relevant to specific parts of the population, and then ensuring, therefore, that our assessments are bias-free and very reasonable and actually there to promote learning like the way we should. So we do need to account for that, and one of the ways is to acquire good quality data because that solves a lot of problems. Talking about, I'm just continuing on the diversity issue. Actually, another interesting point that came out of doing these very large-scale assessments, like we are doing in all Kendriya Vidyalaya schools. So we're also collaborating with, some experts in learning disabilities. And when they looked at the amount of data we have about 1 lakh children across grade 3, for instance, and also across other grades across India. They were very, very sure that the lowest quartile of performers probably have a very high proportion of learning disability children. And they said that if you can just find that and mine it, it would be such a service to the school, the teacher, the parent, and of course the child, in terms of just flagging all of these. And all of this could really not happen if we weren't operating at that scale and trying to establish benchmarks and establish quartiles, because the community or tagging for, the disabilities is actually, it's kind of, underdone. It's not really up to what's expected in the population. And as for learning, assessment spaces, yes, it's true, technology is actually fairly fragile. And, if you're trying to do a reading assessment which involves having a child look at an unseen passage on a mobile device and, read it aloud. When you have children screaming in the background, so you have this manual and the coaching for the teachers telling them to find a quiet space and so on, which, of course, may not be possible at all. So the best we do is to flag cases like that, okay, it wasn't a good enough recording and maybe they want to find another way to do it. And we have been actually, when we show pictures of children reading on mobile devices and we compare it with similar software available in the West, where people are sitting in this really nice, quiet lab with excellent, headphone gear on and so on. The people that we are working with in the ministry, they look at that and say, oh, but we have all those language labs. Why are you showing us somebody sitting on the floor and using a mobile phone to do the assessment, in India? But what we found out is although the schools have iPads and there is a language lab, ultimately the most robust device that's always available is the teacher's mobile phone. And they end up using that. So it's not very nice to see a young child having to do an assessment. It's only a couple of minutes, but even then having to peer at a small mobile device when actually the school does have iPads. They do have a language lab. So in principle, we could make all the conditions better, but that would go beyond just making the technology better, but just changing the culture of how things are done in school. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And do you think there are enough data sets in India that, that can talk to the linguistic diversity of India?
No, not really. But now we have a good understanding of what we need. So I think if there's a will, it can be done. And finally, that's what's going to. It's not all the very clever models and all the compute infrastructure that, of course, helps. But having really good labeled data, it's a way to embed experts' knowledge. Now they talk about large language models. What are they? They're really, capturing all the knowledge and the understanding that has happened over, generations into a model that suddenly becomes accessible to somebody who's not an expert, but, would like to really know and use. Yeah.
Do we have 10 minutes? 5 minutes? So 2 very quick questions then for you, Sonali, and then Vanita. What goes into creating Sesame? What is the ethos in creating the digital version of Sesame?
Very big question and very short time to answer. But I think when we started building out the Chalo Sesame Street app, there were a lot of lessons that we had to learn. I think the first question Gouri had asked us about a year ago, the children are watching videos, but actually are they learning anything? And some good interesting data, we have found out that while math and skills like that, they can watch up to 2 to 3 videos and understand the concept. But what we have understood that for more complex, concepts like socio-emotional well-being, it takes up to 6 to 7 videos viewing to come up with more clarity on concept. Then we had to build this app based on the Nipun journey. So that was the other interesting element. So the app that we built actually mirrors the learning goals of Nipun. So we had to really build out the assessments, etc. And then build the learning journey in an app. And it couldn't be structured. Children should be free to roam around the app and, take the assessments. And of course, the educationists in Sesame have a lot of power over everything that goes. So they said, when will the assessment come in? Should be in the middle of the video, should be at the end of the video. So we went through a lot of trial and error, and, you've been such a journey friend on this one. But safety, I just want to touch on quickly on so many elements. Since we had to also keep it cost effective for the last mile user, means the app cannot be heavy. The video has to play from the YouTube. So we had to make sure that the child, when in the app environment, cannot leave the environment. So we had to code for that. And the app, for that sense, safety is really critical. And if I say that's one of the key features, when the child is in that app, they can't leave the app, and they can move through videos, etc. So, we tried to keep the bandwidth question, the cost question, and in fact, one of the promos for the app is that, all it takes is a cup of tea to give up a cup of tea for a parent to really provide the app to the child for about 40 minutes of learning a week. And the app also further includes, this whole screen time debate. So after 20 minutes of usage, there is a pop-up that says, now you're done. You can actually turn the app off. So there are so many things that we, as had to sort of learn as we went along, and in terms of now whether the child is learning and the completion of the assessment, do these assessment works? And mind you, I may be smart talking now, but if I go back to my journey 5 years ago, it wasn't the same case, like really understanding relation-based management system, my God, that was a mouthful. But now we understand really what the child is doing. And it's not just about engagement, it's actually designing what kind of a childhood you want. And I think that's the moot point, that when the child drops the device, does the child go into some kind of tantrums, which is what we are seeing. When you turn off the television, you take away the device, the child actually gets very stressed. So I think that's the last point I want to make, that the Sesame content, and I have had this validated by parents, that children feel calmer. We are not into the into the business of dopamine hits. And I think that's what media has become today. Every 5 seconds, you need a dopamine hit to, and what you just spoke about, is to keep the child hooked to streaming, to viewing. And I think that's, if I say, the very mood principle of really creating content, creating and designing for a childhood where the child feels connected, feels curious, feels critically in control and not isolated. So I think those are the things that we would be looking at, apart from seeing whether the child is learning, whether the child is advancing and hitting all those development, quote-unquote, learning goals, but is the child in a much more curious space and has control and agency.
Absolutely. And that's my question to you, Vanita, as well, right? Beyond academic outcomes, how do you assess whether EdTech is actually helping a child develop the curiosity that Sonali was talking about, developing the confidence to deal with the world?
Thanks, Gouri, and I'll keep it succinct. But I love what Sonali just said in terms of, what sort of childhood do you want the child to have and to remember? And also yesterday, Dr. Swati was talking about, very engagingly about, how do we start to embed these healthy behaviors in children in terms of technology is not going to go away, even, when, I have a 6-month-old niece and she already knows what a phone is, even though we don't put it in front of her. But how do you embed those healthy behaviors? How do you use EdTech in a way that engages the child but doesn't overtake the child? How does the EdTech also become a way of engaging the parent and the child in that joint learning journey? I think those are important metrics. Digital safety, as we've been talking about, I think is also critical in terms of how you build that into the applications, but also, as Nina was touching on, how do you also help parents, because we're also all keeping up and learning about technology, and really to be able to understand digital safety, we have to understand the pace of change and things like chatbots, etc. Some of these things may yet be things that parents are also learning about, but can become challenging spaces for children. So a lot more needs to be done there. And I think just finally, just how we can also measure that, where we are using EdTech, that it is really helping children build those critical thinking skills. Cognitive development, yes, but also critical thinking skills, especially as they get older. AI is not going to go away. AI is something that we are all using as a tool to help us. But how do we ensure that we're building those critical thinking skills in children so they know how to use it, but they also know how to understand it and how to challenge?
Wonderful. And we are on time, so I go away with this group with a lot of hope that tech will be used safely and responsibly for our young children. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panel.